Today is World Water Day, a day set aside by the United Nations to raise global awareness about issues like sanitation, scarcity, and wastage of the precious resource.
Now, this is especially significant now that several parts of this region are facing exceptionally high temperatures. Schools in certain parts of Malaysia are closed today and tomorrow, with temperatures in Malaysia reaching a high of 39.2 degrees Celsius over the weekend.
Temperatures are also expected to remain high in Singapore until the end of this week. Water security is certainly a pressing issue in this region.
So to discuss this main thrust of this year's World Water Day, we have in the studio Mr. Subu Kanaka Sabapathy, and he's the Regional Managing Director for Water for the Asia-Pacific region at International Engineering Consultancy, CH2M. That's a company which works with various organizations on water issues.
And with him is Bernard Tan, Deputy Director of Industry Development at Singapore's National Water Agency, PUB. Bernard is also Managing Director of Singapore International Water Week. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank you.
I was doing a bit of research prior to your arrival, and according to the UN, it says that Brazil takes the top spot when it comes to having access to fresh water. What about different regions? Subu, let's start with you. In Asia in particular, what challenges are there to access fresh water?
That's a good question. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's a great occasion to be talking about water, which we all fiercely feel an important topic to deal with. If you were to look at the entire water industry issues, you look at it in three parts. It's about water availability, it's about water quality, and it's about water equity. I mean, if you can kind of summarize and frame the issue in these three components, it's very, very easy to kind of understand what the issues are. One of the issues we have from a water availability perspective is we do not have, unlike the West, who has very high per capita freshwater availability, we do not have that issue. We have an issue to deal with. The second thing is with respect to sanitation coverage, which deals with water quality issues and the rising issues around health challenges that we need to deal with. The third interesting issue that we really need to do is water equity. When you talk about equity, there are so many stakeholders that we deal with. It's not about the gender equity, it's not about the present and the future, it's also about the principal consumers. You have the industries, you have the agriculture, and you have the domestic users we have to deal with. So the question is, how do you reconcile the dilemma? That's the consistent theme that you go across around the world, and particularly in this region, that people deal with. More so with the population increasing and the expectation, we call it the rise in the consumer class. Everybody wants to have access to meat over wheat, which means you need 10 times more water, right? That talks about availability, that talks about quality, but then the question is, how does it deal with the equity issue? Do I have to serve the needs of wheat or meat?
So perhaps we could turn the tables now to Bernard. Bernard, you're with the PUB, which is responsible in Singapore for our water. And so how would you define the Singapore government's a game plan for meeting these different areas that Subu has just outlined?
I think it's timely that you mentioned in terms of the world heating up. You know, this week is particularly heating up. Water levels are dropping. In Singapore, it's not just about increasing supply. I think the water demand, in terms of how much water people use, is extremely important to us, and thereby it points us to Singapore's theme in terms of our World Water Day celebration. We said we wanted everyone to make every single drop counts. What does that really mean? We started out World Water Day with a one-day celebration, and then we have extended it to a month-long activities. Really, the reason is because it gives us an opportunity to reach out to different sectors, different players, mainly the government sectors, the people, which means the community and the grassroots, and last but not least, the private sectors coming into the picture. Everybody needs to play their part in order to save that drop, and that's where the demand management comes in. It's not just about creating the next supply of water.
Subu, some say water is the most essential item in the world, but we don't treat it that way. So in terms of how to save what we do have, what are the biggest challenges to teaching people to conserve water and to take care of what we have left?
That's a great question. And you know, one of the things, we were serving one client, another government client outside the region, in doing the entire water sector reform. And the question that we were actually dappling with is, how do you make sure that the future generations start to realize the need for valuing water? It goes back to the fundamental thing: is it a merit good or is it a social good? Everybody thinks you do not have a problem paying for oil, or has a problem paying for water because you feel it's an act of God. I get the water from a raindrop. What are you doing about it? So it's more an entitlement mentality from the people saying that I do not want to pay for water. What people are beginning to realize is that it's not an easy solution because you have to bring water from 300 kilometers in some cases because of the massive migration that's going on and urbanization that's going on, the new cities that are being built. People are not able to make the connection. And the biggest issue right now is also the fact that you don't have a political longevity in most countries. You don't have a leadership that continues for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. So you have a real ticking time bomb. We call it a hydropolitics, between states, between stakeholders. How do you deal with that? How do you reconcile that? So the question is, how do you make sure that the people are beginning to see the value of water? That's the first step. So one of the things that PUB does really well, which kind of resonates very well across the region, is what they call as a PPP approach. There are three stakeholders: the public, which is the government, the private, which is sectors like us, and the people, who are the biggest stakeholders in the whole game. So if you look at, and now you have new actors like climate change come into it, and then there is a water energy nexus that we really need to deal with. The question is, how do you do your role there? So the way broadly we see it from a government perspective, the government is largely focused on addressing the supply gap, right? Which means you really want to make sure that, have I diversified my water portfolio? Have I moved away from the traditional sources of groundwater and surface water? Right? Am I looking at desalination? Am I looking at conveyance from a very, very longer 400 kilometers? Pipelines? Or am I looking at new water, which Singapore PUB is doing it, which is a fantastic solution? So that's the thing that the public sector is doing.
Now, Subbu, I'd like to turn the tables a little bit and bring into the conversation to both of you this theme that we have for this year's World Water Day, which is better water and better jobs.
Perfect.
So we're looking at the other aspect of supplying, addressing a need, and that need is in the economics of it. What is the impact of all this on the economy, on growth, on jobs, on prospects for people?
Okay. Just 10 years ago, the government decided that water is one of the key strategic areas to invest in research and development. So the government set aside 330 million Singapore dollars at that point and topped it up with another 140 in 2011. And that brings the total sum to 470 million over 10 years. And what does this money do? Is really to fund water research, water R&D, attracting companies to grow their R&D facilities here. And in the process, it creates high-value jobs. The government set for us a target of doubling the jobs, triple the value add, but we have way exceeded that. As of today, in a 10-year span, we have created like 14,000 jobs in Singapore, and of course, bringing the economic value add of $2.25 billion in terms of the economic value add. So this just means that when in the process of solving your problems, it's not just about building infrastructure, it's about creating good value jobs for the nation as well.
And wrapped up in that is the education of the public along the way, isn't it? I mean, what could the average person really do? I mean, you're sitting there thinking, I do my work, I live in an HDB flat. What does my contribution mean? What does that amount to?
Which is why that we created this Singapore International Water Week, because I think adding on to what Subbu has said about the 3P, in addition to that, I just want to add that the many actors around the world in the region comes into play as well. In 2008, we created this platform called the Singapore International Water Week, where we bring together this nexus of regional government leaders, the regional financier like your Asian Development Bank, World Bank, who's able to fund infrastructure projects. And of course, importantly, we have the academia, the scientists, and of course, not least the industry, who's able to give us the solutions to make things happen.
But just today, what would you like our viewer to take away from this conversation with
People are watching, they're thinking, okay, this is an issue I care about, but what can I do?
Me? Yeah.
Both of you.
My son wrote an article about a year ago. He said, water saved is water earned.
Wow.
I thought it was very interesting. He looked at water as dollars. It was, instead of saying dollar saved is dollar earned, he spent a lot of time trying to get the title, and he ended up saying, water saved is water earned.
And that buys us our future, doesn't it?
That buys us our future. And then just one last point, coming back to what he said, and from a CH2M perspective, one of the things that we're actually working in close cohort with, closely with EDB and PUB, is that we are actually moving away from this concept of a hydro hub to an infra hub. So one of the things that Singapore people are working here is that, What is my future if I'm going to be working in the water industry? Is that a sexy business? It's not like banks, it's not like law, it's not like this. What am I going to do that? So this infra hub is actually a fascinating concept, because most of the time when you're working on a water solution for another sector, whether it is an oil and gas sector or whether it is building a new city, planning comes in really, really importantly.
Thank you very much for your time, Subbu Kanaka-Sabapathy and Bernard Tan.
Of course, my parting word is that remember, today is World Water Day. Make every drop counts. Thank you.
Yes, it is, absolutely. And you can find out more about World Water Day as well as Singapore International Water Week on the website that's now on your screens.